Hello and welcome to The Hard Sell, where the stick in the swill-bucket rattles back. In this episode was the idea of Philippe Branco. Once again, sign up for my Patreon and you too can order me about. By which I mean make suggestions that I eventually get around to with only a little bit of poking. He had to remind me once, which is pretty good going by my standards. But anyway, here it is, and it's a not brand X. Commercial flight began between the wars. Britain's first major airline, Imperial Airways, was launched in 1924, followed by the original British Airways Limited in 1935. They were merged together and nationalised to form the British Overseas Airways Corporation, BOAC, in 1939, just in time for the war to restrict their business. Once the skies were safe from Spitfires and Fokkers and the like, the industry truly boomed. BOAC was our flag carrier, and its advertising suggested it was the most British company in the world.
Everything all right, Stewardess Hopkins?
Seems to be, Chief.
Kiss me good night, Sergeant Major. Tuck me in my little wooden bed. We all love you, Sergeant Major.
Good night, sir. Pleasant dreams. Anything I can get you, Captain?
Oh, a spot of coffee might go down very well.
I'll crack the whip in the galley, sir.
Oh, jolly good.
Got everything you want, sir?
Kiss me good night, Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major, be a mother to me.
On BOAC, things just happen with a minimum of fuss.
I can only assume they played the national anthem before lowering the lights, and everyone stood up and saluted. There were actually two major British airlines in those days. BOAC carried the flag, but spun off from them as soon as the war ended was British European Airways, BEA, who, as the name suggests, went to the continent, weren't quite as expensive, and took on association with the first wave of package holidays. Their advertising was more cosmopolitan, as you might expect, but with British values and identity still providing a hard red underline.
This is Trident, the most beautiful jetliner flying to Europe. Built by Hawker Siddeley, powered by Rolls-Royce. It belongs to BEA and to you.
850 Trident.
Captain Turnbull speaking. We're just passing over the French coast and we should be arriving at our destination in 2.5 hours' time.
Morning, man. It's nice to see you again.
Was your little boy like a jigsaw puzzle?
Time's the Daily Express, sir.
Yes, drinks are free for the children.
It's quite all right, sir. Everybody does that.
You can fly with us to more places in Europe than with any other airline.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain again. We're about to commence our descent. We shall be arriving on schedule. I do hope you've enjoyed your flight.
We are as near as your nearest travel agent, BEA.
The two airlines spent the next quarter century or so trying to outdo each other and squabbling over routes and schedules, until a report into the industry in 1969 recommended merging them back together, along with a few of the smaller commercial airlines. This was completed in 1974, and the world stood in awe at Britain's new flag carrier, British Airways, which is what this episode is about. Hooray! The all-new British Airways' initial slogan was the patriotic and forceful "Fly the flag." This was the peacetime face of British air power. Of course, the effectiveness of patriotism depends very much on the state of the nation at the time. And this was when Britain was the sick man of Europe. Fuel crisis on top of fuel crisis, and a 3-day week only lifted months before BA's launch. No one was particularly impressed by the mere fact of being British, except the rising National Front. Waving Union Jacks around was becoming increasingly associated with those chuckle fucks, So the television advertising for the new British Airways tended towards the same strategy as BOAC before it, boasting on how well they look after you. They called them super flights and suggested that their employees will do everything short of suck you off to make you comfortable.
Oh, that wonderful sovereign holiday in Greece. That was when I bought that genuine ancient Greek urn. Do you know, I never thought I'd get it home in one piece.
Look out!
It was so roomy, that British Airways TriStar. And the stewardess was so understanding about my urn.
Should I put that somewhere safe for you, madam?
Please, but be very careful with it. I will.
You see that woman with the blonde bob and unsettlingly pale eyes? Well, if you didn't, don't worry, because you're going to keep seeing her for the next several minutes. That's Roz Hanby, Roz for short, and she was the face of British Airways for its first 7 years. When I first became aware of her, I assumed she was a model, and technically she was, but only after the adverts. She was actually genuinely a BA stewardess, to use the terminology at the time, rather than anyone of showbiz ambitions or connections. The agency, Foot, Cone and Belding, decided to centre the Fly the Flag campaign around a typical flight attendant's routine. It was a common thing in those days for airlines to advertise via hot stewardesses, and Roz was the hottest that British Airways had. In fact, it was practically de rigueur. It's almost impossible to look back at 1970s airline adverts, particularly from America, without wincing like you've got a harpoon in your thigh. And that's before we get into the disturbing Freudian places some of them went to. Luckily for Roz, we were largely too British to be this explicitly lecherous. At least our objectification was polite. And so she became a sort of British Singapore girl for several years. Her smiling face was practically part of the British Airways logo by the late 70s, and her Meg Foster eyes provided the closing shot for television ads, even as they moved away from actually being about her and her day, and onto things like casual racism.
No!
They have buildings in Africa, you know. I dare say that they even know what aeroplanes are, rather than just thinking they're giant silver birds propelled by white man's magic, so shocking they almost drop their goddamn watermelons, you assholes. And so Roz Hanby unexpectedly became famous, which was a bit annoying, not to say overwhelming, because she was still a working flight attendant. Or she tried to be, but apparently people kept getting in the way asking for her autograph. It was so disruptive that she was exclusively assigned to Concorde, where, as she put it, everyone else was more famous. She even got to eat a henchman in a Bond movie. Foot, Cone and Belding had her on a 10-year contract, and that soon became moot. And this is the inevitable point in the video where I start going on about Margaret Thatcher and the Conservative Party and capitalism and such. So this is your chance to bail out. Okay? Right. So, yes, that woman's in charge now, and obviously the public sector is anathema to her and her government. So they immediately set BA on the road to privatisation. To that end, cosy advertising about how they'll take care of you was out, as was Roz Hanby and Foot, Cone and Belding themselves. In came the young, thrusting Saatchi and Saatchi, who were at the forefront of the new wave of advertising. Conceptual, artistic, and cinematic. and their first commission for BA was all three of these.
Roger, Manhattan. Continue descent to flight level 80.
Roger, Heathrow, descending to SL80.
Manhattan, that's correct. Contact radar director on 120.4. Roger, Manhattan. Continue to 2,000 feet, reduce speed to 170 knots.
Every year, more people choose to fly with British Airways to more countries than with any other airline.
Leaving 2,000 feet on the glide path.
In fact, every year we bring more people across the Atlantic than the entire population of Manhattan.
Manhattan, you are clear to land. 28 right.
British Airways, the world's favorite airline.
The Saatchis deliberately eschewed any shots of actual aircraft either inside or out, which might seem a bit like writing an entire novel without using the letter E. But someone did that too. Instead, it was one of the most purely and gigantically metaphorical adverts in years, so colossal in scope that a lot of people in the industry didn't get it at all. For example, Richard Kiernan, Senior VP at Grey Advertising, called it a brilliant pyrotechnic execution, but also said, "I don't know what they're trying to tell me." Robert E. Jacoby, chairman of the Ted Bates Agency, was similarly baffled and said it has such an emphasis on making British Airways memorable that it takes away from the message. The point Jacoby missed is that making British Airways memorable was the message. It was no longer about you, the customer, it was all about them, the company. The new slogan, "the world's favourite airline," was a bit of a stretch at the time, but the point was to make it true. It wasn't trying to impart specific information, it was trying to instill a sense of awe at the company itself. In that respect, it was as much for future shareholders as potential flyers. The seasoned ad men might not have understood it, at least not yet, but it did the job for the public. It got British Airways noticed and talked about. The next few years saw several attempts at quietly repeating the formula, with similarly tortured metaphors brought to life with such clarity and skill as to get away with how daft it all really was.
When you're next away from home and in need of a little help, it's worth remembering British Airways has people in more places than any other airline.
Smoking or non-smoking?
Non-smoking. British Airways, the world's favourite airline.
Sometimes these even heralded new innovations, such as the Super Club forerunner to modern-day business class.
This is British Airways Super Club Class seat. The widest seat in the air. The being the widest seat in the air, it isn't the easiest to fit through the door. Now on all our long-haul flights, the world's widest airline seat. From the airline that cares about everyone that flies. Super Club. From the world's favorite airline.
The Sarchis were so successful at bringing British Airways to prominence that in 1985 the whole company got a makeover with the Speedwing logo, which coincided with a minor recruitment drive and employee training program that was reflected in the advertising, which means that yes, they did go back to the we'll take care of you thing. But it's the mid-80s now, so they went a lot harder than they had in Roz Hanby's day.
To catch. My case. Your case, sir. Won't you? I must fly.
Over the last 2 years, everyone at British Airways has been trained in the art of putting people first. We seem to have taken it to heart. No wonder British Airways is the world's favourite airline.
British Airways flight attendants are superhumans dedicated to serving your every need. Prove they aren't. The inevitable privatisation came in 1987. The Great British Sell-Off was well underway by then. British Telecom and British Gas were already gone, and the government shook off the last few tanknuts of BP around the same time. But the sale of British Airways was the biggest of all up to that point. One of the first times such a huge airline passed from state to private hands. Naturally, it was a vast undertaking. Equally naturally, it was pitched straight at the proletariat as a magnificent opportunity, complete with stomach-churning reappropriation of the fanfare for the common man.
VR set to London, 260 radial. Nav lights, off. Throttle masters, on. Ground hydraulic checkout.
This is a countdown to takeoff. Because very soon, you will have the opportunity to buy shares in a major British company, British Airways. To be sure you receive a prospectus and application form, ring 01200 1000 day or night, or send off the coupon in your newspaper.
The before takeoff check is complete. Speedbird Concorde 1 cleared for takeoff. Everyone ready? Ready? 3, 2, 1.
The British Airways share opportunity, 01200 1000.
Of course, it had nothing to do with the common man. None of these privatisations did. It was about making rich people richer. And it worked. British Airways entered its imperial phase, characterised by an aesthetic best described as yuppie Olympian. They'd actually earned that slogan inside 5 years. And now their advertising was all about self-congratulation. As for consumer-side messaging, if you'll forgive me for using a horrible advertising term, in the late 80s it mostly concerned club class, the epitome of yuppie luxury, the only way to zoom from London to New York to Tokyo to, I don't know, Reigate probably, to make multi-million-pound deals on whatever it is you're doing. The television advertising was full of Howard's Way machinations. Here's a particular favourite.
So, 2 years overseas, and he thinks he can tell us how to run things. Well, we won't have it.
It's all right. I fix things. He's travelling overnight.
Not first class?
No. Business class, of course. Company policy.
By the time he gets in, he'll be exhausted. And he won't have had time to incorporate those new figures I sent him in his report.
He'll be hungry
and tired.
I've arranged for the chauffeur to bring him straight here, not to the hotel.
Like a lamb to the slaughter, gentlemen.
Morning.
Club World delivers the business traveller ready to do business.
Pleasant trip.
Yes, thank you.
Club World, from the world's favourite airline.
Maybe not the most watertight plan in business history. Maybe you should have actually bought him the plane tickets, courtesy of FUA, the airline that punches you in the face. Just a thought.
This feud you have with Avalon is rapidly getting out of control. It's clouding your judgment.
Oh, no. I'm seeing things very clearly right now. Avalon believes she's absolutely secure. That's the very time that we strike.
Poxy boat yard in Leon the Solent didn't look like his golden and bleeding sex. Anyway, the yuppie era wasn't to last that much longer. It certainly wasn't an image to deliberately self-apply by the start of the 90s.
Derek, I am not a yuppie.
You are, Stephen. Guaranteed.
Another blockbuster was needed to set BA's image for the new decade. For preference, it would have to be one of the most iconic advertisements of all time. So that's what they did. This was covered in the episode on Hugh Hudson, who directed it, although he modestly credited the choreographer, hovering above the action with a megaphone, and especially the thousands upon thousands of extras, mostly local Utah schoolchildren. "25 years later, it's still an astonishing achievement, and all from a hastily scribbled sketch by Charles Saatchi.
Every year, the world's favorite airline brings 24 million people together.
It was so good, it didn't need to be followed up for 6 years, by which time the Saatchis had been fired from their own company. Not that they needed them. Most of the same crew, including Hudson, returned for a Christo and Jean-Claude homage, or rip-off, if you'd rather. Which was arguably an even greater technical achievement, but not as iconic an advert.
British Airways. We cover the world.
In between those two adverts, however, things went a bit wobbly for British Airways, as they suddenly faced some serious and disturbingly close competition, and didn't know how to respond. The way they eventually did went so badly, they needed to relaunch their entire image. All of that will be covered in the next exciting episode of The Hard Sell, because this one's already long enough. Maybe the episode after that. We'll see how we feel. Stay tuned or something.
You've got a smiling face. You took my lady to another place. Fly her away, fly her away. Airborne, airborne, airborne. You've got a smiling face. You took the one I love so far away. Fly her away, fly her away. Airborne, airborne, airborne. You've got a smiling face. You took my lady to another place. Fly her away.
You just sat through a Bob the Fish production. Nice! If you haven't already, you absolutely must check out bobthefish.org.uk. Literally hundreds more videos not unlike that one, adding up to days worth of entertainment and all absolutely free. But if you're not a cold-hearted skinflint, you can always support us on Patreon. For as little as anything at all, you can make programs like the one you just watched possible in the first place, and become eligible for bonus material such as glimpses of the book I'm writing about the BBC, monthly riffings on random commercial breaks, the complete archives of the angry political satire magazine Two Sons, and even the odd very occasional bonus video essay unavailable anywhere else. If nothing else, you should prevent me from starving and or freezing to death in the foreseeable future, so that'll be nice. No pressure or anything. You make it what it is.